Welcome fellow historians, my name is Aysar Dhiyaa and this is my documentary about why Canada is a better country now than it was before, starting off with immigrants. The MV Sunsea finally arrived Canada's harbour, they were relieved. It was carrying a total of 492 Sri Lankan immigrants seeking for a new place. Canada, although didn't accept the immigrants from the MV Sunsea, instead, city officials ordered the ship to leave. Immigrants were a bad eye to the public as everyone blamed them for taking old job opportunities from Canadians. Despite the Chinese's importance to the Canadian economy, like creating the CPR or Canadian Pacific Railway, many people were hostile to new Chinese immigrants. The government established a prohibitive head tax that restricted immigration from 1885 to 1923. A Chinese immigrant named Chuck Lee had to pay $500 head tax to just enter Canada after he was returning from a marriage in China. They didn't let him back due to the Prohibition of Chinese Immigrations Act. When he applied for jobs, they would tell him that the job was already taken and that they'd call him back. Discrimination among society. In World War I, colored and First Nations soldiers were avoided in the recruitment of battalions, and it was extremely rare of them to become enlisted. According to the in-course content, a saying from the First Nation soldiers says, when he was in uniform he was considered an equal by what he could do. When he came back, he just went back to being an Indian. Indians at the time were not even Canadian citizens. They treated colored soldiers and First Nation soldiers horribly. Jeremiah Jones, a black Canadian, destroyed 2 German airplanes at a German aerospace. He was rewarded a Distinguished Conduct Medal for his recognition, but he didn't receive. He proved that a black man's worth in a white man's army was present. However, after all of that, black soldiers still faced discrimination. W. H. Allen said that neither my man nor himself would care to sleep alongside them or to eat with them, especially in warm weather. Also, many French-speaking soldiers like Leo Le Butler and Thomas Louis Tremblay, the soldiers felt alienated as they didn't speak English around them. Women's roles and discrimination. During the First World War, men's decisions and words were over women's words. Women had no significance or power to defer an opinion. This made women worry and terrified during the World War I as they had no impact in changing men's minds. Many suffragists like Nellie McClung were members of the Women's Parliament. They fought for the right of women. In 1918, women gained the right to vote, and women were able to sign up for specific off-combat jobs like driving ambulances, but the most prominent role was nursing. Over 1,000 women joined World War I. They had to treat massive amounts of troops in under-equipped tents. The Roaring Twenties and the Economic Boom. The Roaring Twenties was a period of great happiness and economic expansion and growth, which meant increased level of economic goods, activity, and services. Many big and small businesses opened. This resulted in lower employment rates and higher gross domestic product. After a period of time, the demand of Canadian products grew and faster production line, which meant less money. Prices dropped as everyone owned products like the 4T model. After the end of World War I, soldiers expected to return home being regarded as heroes. Instead, they came to unemployment and a terrible economy as factories shut down and trade being collapsed. This led to the Great Depression or the Dirty 30s in 1929. This was the time of high unemployment rate, crops were worth nothing. Existing prime ministers like Mackenzie King and R.B. Bennett tried to make an impact on this but were shut down by the public. He instead created relief camps that provided food and shelter for a low-wage, inhumane job. Many people say that this was a way of the government to hide the unemployment problem. Aboriginals were discriminated against. Indigenous peoples like Aboriginals, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people were tempered by their special standing and legal status engraved in their treaties and the Indian Act. First Nations children were taken from families and were put on long train rides to residential schools extremely far away. They were church-run and operated from nuns and priests. They were sinister and strict. If they spoke their native language, they were punished. Many kids were killed due to this. Aboriginals were viewed as minorities. The federal government took and used their land for projects, prohibited the use of mechanized farming equipment, and the ways natives celebrate. They were only allowed to use items they crafted. For example, they were punished if they used the metal nail. They also were prohibited to kill any cattle, and due to this, they were also always starving. Political government. The federal government didn't always listen to everyone. They ignored women and the Aboriginals. A white man's world was worth more. But they did respond to riots, like the one that took place in Quebec. As Quebec was demanding for the French language to become the official language in the government, they ignored it. Quebec also demanded for more autonomy or complete independence. As the government were extremely passive, this gave birth to the October Crisis, which was a series of bombings, killings, kidnappings, and terrorism attacks. It was between the Front de Libération de Québec, or the FLQ, and the government. They started to place bombs in mailboxes and grew to many other powerful threats. The FLQ kidnapped Sergeants James Cross and Pierre Laporte. In the end, Quebec received nothing they asked, but many of the citizens got arrested. Immigrants. Canada now accepts all immigrants with no initial pay, but must pass 67 points on the point system. There is no more head tax prohibition for Chinese immigrants, as they are always welcome. Canada is a diverse and multiculturalism country that celebrates the traditions and holidays of every group of people. Discrimination amongst society. Canada today recognizes that regardless color, race, background, or religion, you are accepted in our society. Today there is about 40% of Asian descent citizens in Canada. Diversity is Canada's strength, as it states in pm.gc.ca. Now there are thousands of colored Canadians and women in our army today. They aren't discriminated against and are seen as all the other soldiers. After the French-Canadian regiment, many French-speaking soldiers got promoted to high ranks. This showed that they valued their soldiers with honor, women's roles, and discrimination. Today, women hold the same title as a man. Through years of pain and progress, women finally gained equality. Even though they are delicate figures, now women can enlist in the army or have the same opportunities in jobs. Women have the right to vote and say their opinion. Gender equality in Canada today is no issue, as the government, public, and social leaders respect them both equally. Aboriginals are discriminated. Aboriginals in Canada today are respected greatly. In fact, Prime Minister Trudeau also established a National Indigenous Peoples Day, which takes place on June 21st. They celebrate the heritage, diverse cultures, and the outstanding achievements of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. They have fun parties of how Indigenous people festivals work. This creates a linking bond with Canadian citizens and Aboriginals and will hopefully be carried on forever. Canada's parliament today is filled with Aboriginals and women's position. This shows that today Canada can trust and are honored to represent these positions in the parliament. Everyone is heard, including Chinese, refugees, women, and Indigenous people. Although natives still haven't received things they were asked for hundreds of years ago, the government updates and adds to the Indian Affairs Act, which are the rights of Indigenous people. Due to the economic boom, the government has intervened in the stock market and had put limitations and boundaries which would prevent another economic boom. Thank you for listening to me. This sums up my documentary. I believe that Canada is a way better country now than it was before. Back then there were many prohibitions against immigrants, women, colored people, Aboriginals, and the economy. Thank you for watching my documentary.